After years of waiting, AMD has finally graced us with their new desktop Ryzen APUs. And luckily, AMD sent over a couple for me to test out, which means I got a chance to really play around with them to see what exactly works and what doesn't. So today, I'm going to show you how you can make your 8000G APU even faster. Welcome everyone to Gamer Melt. AMD's brand new Ryzen 8000G series APUs can actually game. I'm talking 1080p with even brand new titles, though with pretty heavy RSR upscaling needed for many. That's something we really haven't seen before on desktop. The 5700G was close when it first came out, but there's a ton of tech that really pushes these new chips to the next level. Not only that, but they're great CPUs in their own right. While they aren't the fastest on the market, they're definitely more than enough to provide a path for upgrading to a discrete GPU later on, so you don't have to worry about buying a brand new CPU to go along with it. Though I will say that I'm a little wary about the lower end 8500G and 8300G because for one, I didn't get a chance to test them out myself, but also because they have little Zen 4C cores that don't get nearly as high clocks as their big brother. Not to mention the fact that they have lower PCI Express lanes that could lead to discrete GPUs being held back. Regardless, if you plan to pick one up or you already have it, I've got 5 ways that can ensure you get the most out of your brand new APUs. And this should apply to the lower end models as well. Oh, and if you're interested in picking one up, I'll have affiliate links down in the description below. It doesn't cost you anything more, and it helps the channel out. Starting things off, the first thing on the list is memory speed. Unlike discrete cards, integrated graphics don't come with their own memory specifically made for GPU workloads. Instead, they take from your system memory, which means the faster your RAM is, the faster your iGPU performance can be, which means more FPS. Now, before I get to specific numbers, I do want to say that technically anything over 5200 is considered an overclock, even when you're using AMD's own Expo overclocking profiles. So I'm not liable if anything happens when you overclock your memory. With that out of the way, as a reference, AMD sent DDR5 6400 in our review kits. And what's wild is that anything over DDR5 6000 puts the memory clock and memory controller in a 1:2 ratio, meaning the memory controller is running at half the frequency of the memory itself. Remember that before Zen 4, the Infinity Fabric Interconnects clock was tied to the memory speed, but now only the memory controller is. With it at a 1:2 ratio, memory latency goes up. But according to AMD's own reviewer's guide, memory speed is so important for the iGPU that it's worth adding latency for higher memory clock. What's wild is that according to AMD, memory clocks even higher than 7200 all the way up to 8000 can be achieved. So there's a ton of potential for more FPS and faster memory. And this brings me to the second way to get more performance out of your new APU. Remember I told you that the Infinity Fabric's clock is decoupled from the memories. Well, when system memory is at 6400, which is technically 3200 MHz, the Infinity Fabric clock defaults to 2000, but it can be clocked a bit higher. Remember that the Infinity Fabric is how AMD ties their chiplets together, though because Ryzen 8000G is a monolithic die, it's used as an interconnect between the cores and memory controller, and overclocking this will help with that memory latency. Of course, it's not as important as memory speed, but it does help. Early on in the review process, AMD originally intended for the Fabric to default to 2400, yet later changed it to 2000 to ensure stability. But according to my email exchange with AMD's own Matthew Hurwitz, most users should be able to hit 2400. Though, once again, that is likely considered an overclock, so I take no responsibility in all of that. Either way, to do that, you can do it in the BIOS or AMD's Ryzen Master. The third way to get the most out of Ryzen 8000 is to ensure you have the most up-to-date chipset driver and, more importantly, graphics driver. Because remember, this isn't just your CPU, it's also your GPU. And keeping your drivers up to date is crucial when it comes to getting the best performance you can. And luckily, both of these can be found on AMD's website. For the chipset driver, head to the Resources and Support tab. Then under Downloads, Drivers, then go to the chipset, AM5, choose your motherboard, and install the chipset driver. Then to get the Radeon driver, head back to Downloads, Processors with Graphics, and there should be Ryzen 8000G within there. Or you could just do the automated Radeon driver. You also may want to install a BIOS update. You get that from your motherboard manufacturer's website. The fourth tip for getting a faster APU is to go into your Radeon software that comes with your driver. Then head over to Gaming, Graphics, and turn on HyperRX. This is that feature that automatically turns on Radeon Boost, Radeon Super Resolution, and Fluid Motion frames. Most of the benchmarks you see will likely have this turned on. For those who don't know, Radeon Super Resolution is driver-based upscaling that, like most upscaling, renders the game in a lower resolution and then upscales it to your monitor's default resolution. And it's that default resolution that makes things a little odd here. It's one issue with RSR. Because it isn't a setting in the game itself that turns RSR on, it just automatically upscales once you lower the resolution in the game below your monitors. The issue is that you're going to be upscaling from things like 900p, 720p, things like that. So you'll really have to use a 1080p monitor unless you can figure something out. Of course, that is a pain, so keep that in mind before you buy. It also has to be in full screen mode to work. And I know plenty of people don't like upscaling, and for good reason, but some demanding games are just gonna need it. And remember that fluid motion frames is essentially a driver-based frame generation. Of course, this adds latency, but it essentially doubles the frame rate. Luckily, most of the benchmarks I showed don't even detect frame generation, so it's even better than what it seems. The fifth and final tip is to overclock, or at the very least, you should turn on Precision Boost Overdrive in Ryzen Master. This lets you increase power to your CPU, which is important because the 65-watt TDP can and does hold it back. Even in the reviewer's guide, it shows this, claiming a 5 to 10% performance increase in games easily. You can also use the Curve Optimizer to get a bit more out of your boost, and it includes support for the iGPU. Ultimately, there's a ton of things you can do to get even more FPS out of AMD's new desktop APUs. Let me know what your favorite way is to squeeze out more performance down in the description below. And if you liked the video, please subscribe, and as always, have a great day.